Hey there survivors, thanks for tuning in to the story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, it really helps me keep these stories coming, and while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get started. I wish I could say I remember the exact moment everything fell apart. In truth, the final hours of normal life are more of a haze than a stark memory. One day, I was a college student absorbed in my books, trying to keep up with daily assignments and social obligations. The next, I was awakened by a phone alert that changed everything. I still recall the unnatural intensity of the red banner on my screen: emergency alert, zombie outbreak detected, seek immediate shelter. The words felt surreal, like a scene ripped from a horror movie. My first thought was that it had to be a hack or a prank, but almost as soon as I read that message, my dorm building erupted in chaos. People bolted through the halls, some frantically collecting valuables and packing backpacks, others rushing toward exit doors without any plan. Panic escalated rapidly. Amid the commotion, rumors circulated that there was an official evacuation site at Lincoln High School's gym, just a short distance from our campus. Normally, I would never trust a random text about zombies, but something about the raw fear on everyone's faces compelled me to move. Each step I took down the corridor, I heard the faint echo of screams from outside. In the lobby, students were crying or shouting into their phones, trying to reach loved ones. If this was just a hoax, it was the worst one imaginable, and if it wasn't a hoax, well, I had no clue what I'd do next. That's when I decided I'd head to the high school gym. If there was any place safer than a small, flimsy dorm room, it was a reinforced building with others who could help. A second phone alert buzzed, confirming the location: emergency alert, official shelter at Lincoln High School gym, avoid exposed areas. I dashed out into the late afternoon sun, joining a small group of frantic individuals. My heart pounded so hard I felt it might burst. Even the warm daylight seemed off somehow, like a veil had been drawn over the city, dimming everything. Yet, nothing I observed matched the scale of the panic inside. I saw abandoned cars, broken windows, but the real horror was in the distance, far down the street. Silhouettes moved oddly, as if their limbs were unfamiliar to them. We hurried, scanning alleyways and side streets, ears perked for anything that might be lurking. The closer we got to Lincoln High, the quieter we became, as if afraid our voices would draw unwelcome attention. By the time we arrived at the campus, I was drenched in sweat, my lungs felt like they were on fire. A chain-link fence surrounded the main parking lot. A group of volunteers wearing reflective vests or armbands stood there, ushering people inside through a narrow gate. They performed quick, cursory checks, mostly looking for obvious injuries. I assumed an older medic with tired eyes pulled me aside, shining a small flashlight in my face. "You look all right," she said, offering me water. "No cuts or scratches?" I shook my head, thoroughly unsettled by the question. I asked, "Have there been?" but I couldn't finish. The medic just nodded grimly and waved me forward. "Gym's that way," she said. "Stay calm." The gym was larger than I remembered from the one time I'd been here for a local fundraiser. Rows of cots and foldable chairs were lined up in a patchwork arrangement, taking up nearly all the floor space. Families huddled close, while lone individuals like me drifted uncertainly to the sides, leaning against walls for support. The bleachers were partially folded out, creating cramped seating areas where small groups whispered in low voices. Dozens of faces, all reflecting a universal sense of dread, turned toward me as I walked in. A volunteer at the door gestured for me to find a cot on the right side, near the basketball hoops. I picked an open spot with a thin sleeping mat, set down my backpack and tried to take in my surroundings. Emergency supply boxes lined the walls, people cradled water bottles and small packages of food, unsure how long they were supposed to last. A shrill beep drew everyone's attention to a volunteer carrying a megaphone. "Attention, this shelter is authorized by local officials to provide protection and resources. We have limited food, limited water, and some medical supplies. Please listen for further announcements and remain calm." A ripple of murmured responses spread through the crowd. The volunteer lowered his megaphone and began talking quietly with a group wearing matching armbands. I guessed they were in charge, though none seemed particularly confident. That alone was disheartening. If they felt as frightened and uncertain as the rest of us, what hope did we really have? Outside, the sun was setting, its last rays spilling through high windows and painting long, distorted shadows on the gym floor. The combination of hushed panic and the fading light made the entire space feel like the start of a bad dream, one we couldn't escape. That first night in the gym felt endless. Around midnight, the main overhead lights were turned off to conserve power, leaving only a few portable lanterns to illuminate the cots. Tiny clusters of survivors whispered quietly, reluctant to sleep. I tried to rest but found myself jolted awake by the smallest sounds, the clang of a folding chair somewhere, a distant cough, the rustle of plastic bags, all of it set my nerves on edge. At some point, a phone alert buzzed in unison across multiple devices. Emergency alert, zombie activity increased, stay indoors. The low wail of the alert tone reverberated through the dark gym, sending waves of dread through those who were still awake. I found myself shivering despite the stuffy warmth. Was it adrenaline, exhaustion, both? A volunteer made rounds, trying to reassure us. "It's all right," he whispered. "Have watchers stationed around the building, just keep calm." His words might have been comforting if his own eyes hadn't looked so frightened. Eventually, fatigue overpowered my anxiety and I drifted into a fitful doze, but my dreams were haunted by flickering images, faces pressed against chain link, twisted hands scratching at doors. When I jerked awake, my heart hammered so loudly I was sure the people on neighboring cots could hear it. Morning arrived sluggishly, gray light filtering through the dusty windows. Despite the early hour, the gym was already alive with stressed conversation. Volunteers were setting up stations near the entrance to distribute limited rations, a half bottle of water here, a single energy bar or a small can of vegetables there. I queued up, feeling a pang of guilt for taking food when supplies were obviously tight. We were told to conserve everything and avoid unnecessary movement. They didn't want too many people going in and out of the building, especially given the warnings about increased zombie activity. Curiosity nudged me to explore after receiving my rations. I wandered around the gym taking mental notes. A medical area had been set up in a corner, with a table for basic first aid and a curtained-off space for more critical issues. The bleachers were partially occupied by families who tried to create a semblance of privacy with blankets. A group of younger volunteers clustered near the double doors, discussing a possible supply run. In a small alcove off the main gym floor, I spotted a volunteer organizing a pile of donated clothes. I introduced myself. He said his name was James. He had a kind face, but even kindness seemed overshadowed by worry. He told me they'd tried contacting nearby stores for supplies, but phone lines were unreliable and it seemed that no official rescue was forthcoming. "We're on our own for now," James sighed, folding a jacket. "We need to make sure people don't panic. Fear spreads faster than anything else." I nodded, swallowing hard. Panic was already bubbling in my own chest, I just hadn't let it. Gym's tension thickened. 2 volunteer teams departed on small supply runs, one toward a local grocery store, the other to an outdoor goods retailer rumored to have a backup generator. Their departure was met with both relief and fear. If they returned successfully, we'd have more resources. If not, we'd be down even more capable hands. Inside, worried whispers spread. Some folks claimed they heard scratching at the fence during the night, others insisted the perimeter was secure. A rumor circulated that someone in the gym had been bitten but was hiding it. The story changed with each retelling, but it fueled a simmering paranoia. A middle-aged man sitting near me muttered under his breath, "If anyone's hiding that they were bitten, they'll turn, and then we're done for." He glanced around suspiciously, as though expecting to spot the infected person any second. No official announcements were made to address these rumors, and that only made people more anxious. The volunteers tried to keep everyone calm, but we could sense they were just as overwhelmed. Every so often, someone's phone would chime with a new alert, but they offered little comfort. Emergency alert, continued to shelter in place. Emergency alert, help is delayed. Helplessness set in, we had no timeline, no sense of what was happening beyond the fence. The best we could do was trust that the fence and locked doors would hold. On the second night, I found it no easier to sleep. The gym lights were again switched off, leaving only a few lanterns. I curled up on my thin sleeping mat, adjusting my backpack to use as a pillow. The smell of disinfectant lingered in the air, mixing with the stale odors of unwashed bodies and anxiety. A nearby group talked in whispers, not even trying to sleep. They were young, maybe high schoolers, who'd taken shelter here before their families were split up. Their hushed voices carried a gloom that felt too heavy for their age. Another beep from my phone, the battery was dangerously low, but the display showed a new message, "We're okay, text if you can." It was from my parents. Relief washed over me, they were alive. I quickly typed a reply, "At Lincoln High, safe for now," but the message refused to send. The signal had dropped, or maybe it was jammed by network congestion. I tried a few more times, then gave up, feeling tears well in my eyes. The phone's battery icon blinked, a grim reminder that time was running out. Unable to rest, I decided to walk quietly around the gym perimeter, just to clear my head. I slipped between rows of cots, making sure not to startle the sleeping or half-sleeping form. Near the back exit in a shadowy corner, I found a volunteer named Sarah. She was pacing restlessly, flashlight in hand. She recognized me from earlier. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. I shook my head. Sarah confided that the volunteers had received a partial radio transmission about possible safe zones miles away, but no one could confirm if they were legitimate. The city was on lockdown, or so the rumor went. Sarah was torn about whether to try leading a group out in the hopes of finding real security. But that meant navigating potentially dangerous streets, ones we knew might be crawling with a threat beyond understanding. "We have kids here," she said, pointing her flashlight toward a section of the gym where families were asleep, and elderly folks too. "If we take them outside, can we protect them? Are we better off staying put and hoping for a real rescue?" I had no good answer, no one did. We lingered there, listening to the faint wind rustle the fence. Every now and then, the metal links made a soft clink, like someone or something was testing them. Eventually, I shuffled back to my cot, mind whirling with questions that had no immediate solution. I lay awake, half drifting in that space between conscious fear and restless dreams. As the days went by, the routine settled into a bizarre pattern. We rose with the gray dawn, collected meager rations, attended to any tasks that needed doing, organizing supplies, cleaning small areas of the gym, or helping maintain a semblance of order. The volunteers rotated shifts to guard the entrances, though guard was a strong word for people armed only with improvised tools. Those who returned from supply runs brought back harrowing tales. One group claimed they encountered actual chaos on the streets, vehicles blocking roads, eerie, shambling figures by empty storefronts. Another group witnessed neighbors turned into pale shadows of themselves, though no one wanted to describe them in detail. Whenever I asked about casualties, the volunteers clammed up, eyes dropping to the floor. Their silence was enough to confirm things went poorly. Inside the gym, frustration simmered. People formed tight-knit clusters, hesitant to trust strangers in the next row of cots. Some folks argued that we should consolidate resources more aggressively, take charge with a real plan. Others insisted we maintain democracy, letting every voice be heard before major decisions. Tensions erupted over rationing policies. Once I witnessed a shouting match over a missing bottle of water. A volunteer had to intervene before it escalated further. Amid all this, the phone alerts kept coming, though less frequently. Emergency alert, quarantine in effect. Emergency alert, remain in shelter. The messages felt repetitive, as though whoever was behind them had nothing new to offer, just blanket instructions repeated over an empty airwave. Lincoln High wasn't just a gym, it was a whole complex of hallways, classrooms, and administrative offices. Early on, the volunteers tried to keep everyone contained to the gym, but rumors spread of extra supplies hidden in the locked cafeteria or even the science labs. A couple of adventurous individuals slipped away at night to search, though most returned empty-handed, spooked by the silent corridors and locked doors. One night, I heard a faint tapping sound emanating from somewhere beyond the gym's back exit. It was a slow, inconsistent rhythm, 3 taps, a pause, 4 taps, then silence. My curiosity overrode my caution. I tiptoed away from my cot and pressed my ear to the door that separated us from a rear corridor. All I could make out was a soft shuffle and occasional breathing, or what sounded like breathing. I wondered if it was a volunteer on patrol. Summoning my nerve, I cracked the door open just an inch. The corridor was dimly lit by a single emergency light. Rows of lockers lined the walls, their metal doors painted a dull gray. I called out in a hushed voice, "Hello, anyone there?" No answer, only the faint echo of my words. My pulse pounded in my ears. After about a minute, I decided to let it be. Wandering around alone in this dark labyrinth hardly seemed wise. Still, that tapping sound replayed in my thoughts long after I returned to my cot. It felt like a warning or perhaps a sign that we weren't alone in the building. We were in the gym for what felt like forever, but in reality, it might have been only a few days. Time lost meaning under fluorescent lamps, the days and nights blending together. With each passing hour, more issues surfaced. Water began running low, making sanitation a real problem. The few functioning toilets were overburdened and the smell of untreated waste started to creep into the air. Volunteers tried to keep the place clean, but morale was plummeting. Arguments became more frequent. Some insisted we should relocate to a military base upstate, though no one had proof it was safe. Others argued that leaving would be suicide. One day, Sarah gathered a group of about a dozen survivors near the entrance. I joined them out of curiosity. They were discussing whether to attempt a long trek north, based on a stray radio transmission that mentioned a fortified camp. The group was evenly split between those who believed it was our best hope and those who were terrified of stepping outside at all. During the meeting, James stood up, voice quavering. "Look, I've been outside on 3 supply runs now, each time we lost people. The streets aren't normal anymore, whatever is out there, it's relentless. We barely made it back. I hate feeling like a prisoner, but at least these walls offer some protection." A middle-aged woman responded, "Walls won't save us if they run out of supplies. It's only a matter of time before hunger forces us out." They continued arguing in circles. The outcome was inconclusive. By the end of the discussion, it was clear that any organized escape plan was unlikely. People were too frightened and too divided. Or maybe it was longer. It was hard to track time. A volunteer named Marcus led a fresh supply run. This time, they aimed for a chain pharmacy rumored to have leftover essentials. He picked volunteers carefully, people who could run fast, who weren't easily spooked. They left at dawn, promising to return by nightfall. We pinned our hopes on them. If they found medicine, food, even a generator, it could sustain us longer. As day turned to evening, worried glances kept flicking toward the gym's entrance. By sunset, they weren't back. By midnight, tension was so thick you could practically feel it in the air. A volunteer tried to calm everyone, explaining that maybe they took shelter elsewhere or were hiding until it was safe to return. But the unspoken fear was that something had gone terribly wrong outside. The fence rattled, more persistent than usual. I stared up at the windows, seeing only darkness, yet I sensed shapes out there, unseen presences pressing against our last line of defense. My nerves were raw and I wasn't alone. People paced or huddled together, eyes darting at every small noise. When the chain link fence rattled again, the hush was absolute. Time seemed frozen. Slowly, the clattering subsided, but it left behind a collective dread that only grew stronger with each passing hour. That same night, the generator we'd been using started to sputter, its fuel nearly depleted. We relied on it primarily to power the gym's overhead lights along with a few small appliances. Without it, we would be plunged into near total darkness, save for battery lanterns and flashlights. Close to 2 a.m., a sharp crack echoed through the corridors. Something had fallen or been knocked over. A flurry of movement ensued as volunteers with flashlights rushed to see if we were under attack. I crept along behind them, my heart hammering against my ribs. We found a toppled metal shelf near the cafeteria doors. Cans and packages were strewn across the floor, yet no one was there to claim responsibility. Could it have been an animal or something else that got inside? The volunteers searched with strained expressions. They discovered no obvious breaches, but the incident left everyone unsettled. We fortified the cafeteria doors as best we could, hauling furniture and pushing heavy trash cans against them. Afterwards, as people returned to the gym, I noticed a long smear on the wall. It might have been rust or an old stain, hard to tell in the weak lantern light, but it filled me with unease. The entire building felt as though it were slowly falling apart from the inside out. In the days that followed, the population in the gym thinned. Some cots were left empty, the sheets rumpled and hastily abandoned. No official announcement was made about these disappearances. We could only guess they had tried to escape at night or found some other part of the school to hide in. Others might have been quietly ill, sneaking away so as not to draw attention to themselves. This climate of uncertainty fueled distrust. A group of about 10 people led by an outspoken man named Drew banded together. They claimed they didn't feel safe sharing resources with everyone and wanted to barricade themselves in the locker rooms, taking supplies for their group only. Sarah and James attempted to mediate, warning Drew that splitting from the main group would lead to fragmentation, but he wouldn't be swayed. A tense standoff occurred in front of everyone. In the end, Drew and his followers stormed off, cots in tow. They disappeared behind the gym's far doors, leaving everyone else in a stunned silence. For the next day or so, we heard them rummaging in the locker rooms, pushing around benches, maybe stacking them against the doors. Tensions only grew. Now we had two factions in one building, each suspicious of the other. With so little food, arguments were inevitable. Amid the chaos, I found a sort of companionship with Sarah, James, and a few others who remained dedicated to the idea of communal survival. We'd gather late at night, sharing small bits of hope or memories of life before the alert. Often, the conversation turned to deeper fears. What if rescue never arrived? One evening, we sat in a circle on the gym floor, flashlights pointed downward to avoid attracting attention. The hum of the dying generator droned in the background. James voiced a thought that had clearly been gnawing at him. What if this isn't isolated to our city? The phone alerts, they never mention specific regions anymore, they just say to remain in shelter. Could this be nationwide? A heavy silence followed. We'd all considered that possibility, but tried to avoid thinking about the broader implications. If the crisis was everywhere, what chance did we have? Sarah swallowed hard, forcing a weak smile. We stick together, that's our chance. Her words, though earnest, felt hollow in the vastness of our uncertainty. Desperation peaked when we ran critically low on water. The sinks in the locker rooms and bathrooms still dribbled liquid, but it was barely a trickle and the water pressure seemed to drop each day. We had no way of knowing whether it was safe to drink unboiled tap water, if the city's filtration system still functioned or not. A second volunteer team decided to head to a major supermarket on the other side of town. Their departure was solemn instead of hopeful send-offs. All we could do was glance away, knowing the odds weren't in their favor. They didn't come back that night or the next. Eventually, we stopped expecting them. The anguish on the remaining volunteers' faces told us everything. We had no more illusions that outside runs could reliably save us. But by this time, the gym truly felt like a prison. Chairs, boxes and debris cluttered every corner. A stale odor of unwashed bodies, spilled food and hopelessness lingered. The tension with Drew's group in the locker rooms escalated to occasional shouting matches through the closed doors. They claimed the main area was compromised and refused to share their resources. They even posted guards, fellow survivors who glared at anyone who came too close. Meanwhile, the fences outside groaned more often. We couldn't tell if it was wind or something else pushing against them. From inside, it sounded like an ongoing attempt to break in, day and night with no respite. Once, while checking the perimeter doors, I glimpsed a shape outside in the dusk. I couldn't fully discern what it was, just a figure moving erratically near the fence. It stayed there for a few seconds, as if sensing me through the small window, then vanished into the gloom. That night, I had trouble breathing whenever I thought of what might be just beyond those walls. Time lost all meaning. We survived on rationed snacks, odd canned goods and sips of water. The volunteer announcements grew less frequent, many of them were simply drained of energy. Even the old medic who had checked me upon arrival seemed defeated, spending most of her time tending to people with stress-related ailments or dehydration. When a volunteer approached with minor scratches from a scuffle over resources, she merely shook her head as if even she was unsure how to help anymore. We tried to keep the generator functioning for a few hours each night, but fuel was nearly gone. One evening, it sputtered dangerously, cutting out for several seconds at a time, plunging us into an abyss of darkness before roaring back to life. Each time it died, the gym erupted in panicked murmurs. Every phone left with battery beeped sporadically, though we received fewer official messages. Some were duplicates of older alerts: stuck in a loop, emergency alert, high-risk area, avoid travel. Emergency alert, remain in your shelter. We felt abandoned, left to fend for ourselves in a shell of a school that had become our final downfall. I heard something that still haunts me, a single piercing scream echoing down the hallway. It was distinctly human, filled with such terror that my blood ran cold. I scrambled out of my cot, fumbling for my flashlight. Others did the same. Sarah, James and a few volunteers gathered, shining beams of light into the dark corridors. We never found who screamed. We discovered only a trail of scattered belongings, a shoe, a fallen flashlight, a crushed water bottle, leading to a side door that was ajar. Beyond it, a pitch-black hallway awaited, silent except for a faint drip of water from leaky pipes. We retreated hastily, not wanting to wander too far from the main group. The fear among us became palpable. People whispered theories: did someone try to escape? Did they encounter an intruder? Our imagination spiraled. That same night, the chain-link fence rattled more violently than ever. Some survivors huddled in groups, covering their ears to block out the dreadful noise. Others paced anxiously, fiddling with any object at hand. A child cried in the darkness, her sobs echoing in the stillness. 2 days later, tension with Drew's group hit a breaking point. They stormed the gym, claiming they needed more blankets and water. The confrontation escalated when one of Drew's followers shoved a volunteer who stood in their way. Within moments, shouts erupted and a chaotic melee broke out. We scrambled to intervene. Sarah tried to mediate, stepping between the two sides, arms raised in a plea for calm. James attempted to talk sense to Drew, but the man was too far gone, tired, hungry, paranoid. He spat accusations that the volunteers were hoarding resources and that staying in the gym was a death sentence. The argument escalated until Drew, face red with fury, roared, "I'd rather take my chances outside than rot in here." He and his group snatched extra supplies, ignoring pleas to cooperate. Before we knew it, they rushed to an exit door, forcibly unlocking it. Alarms wailed for a moment, but the group pushed onward, determined to flee into the world outside. We watched as they disappeared beyond the fence perimeter. Some carried improvised weapons, others clutched backpacks stuffed with stolen provisions. Their fate was unknown. The door they broke open was never properly secured again, leaving a critical gap in our defenses. Eventually, the day came when we ran out of generator fuel altogether. Volunteers had tried every trick, siphoning from abandoned vehicles, searching hidden supply closets, but now we faced the final evening with only battery lanterns. A single line of overhead lights flickered intermittently, powered by the last dregs of the generator. It might have been more comforting to have total darkness than to endure the eerie strobes that cast jumping shadows across the gym. People gathered in tense clusters, too anxious to sleep. Some whispered short prayers or tried to console one another with empty words of reassurance. Others stared at the floor, lost in despair. Outside, a storm threatened. We heard distant thunder, but no rain, just sporadic flashes of lightning that illuminated the fence. In one such flash, I thought I saw figures pressing against the chain link, arms outstretched as if drawn to the flickering light. The silhouette vanished when darkness returned, but the image burned itself into my mind. Sometime around midnight, the generator sputtered its final breath. The overhead lights dimmed, pulsed once and died. Darkness enveloped the gym, broken only by the trembling glow of a few lanterns. Not long after the generator died, the most ominous phone alert of all rang out on the few devices still clinging to battery life: emergency alert, immediate shelter no longer available. It repeated twice, then fell silent. The words sank like lead in our chests. Did it mean rescue efforts were officially called off? That no safe havens remained? As if to confirm our worst fears, a new sound erupted from outside, the thunderous crash of the chain link fence being hammered. Flashlights bobbed as volunteers rushed to the outer doors, pressing their ears against them, trying to gauge the extent of the threat. Some survivors scrambled to stack chairs, tables and anything heavy against potential entry points. The battered door Drew's group had forced open was now a glaring weak spot. A volunteer's voice quavered in the darkness, "They're coming." What followed was an eruption of panicked shouting. Families clung to one another, some people ran aimlessly around the gym, seeking an escape route that didn't exist. The pounding on the outside walls seemed to grow stronger, more relentless. It felt like the entire building shook, as if an unstoppable force was finally tearing through our last stand. The floodgates of fear fully opened. A few volunteer leaders attempted to maintain order, shouting for people to move to interior hallways, while others tried to secure the main doors. But the plan quickly fell apart. The moans and scraping outside grew in volume and soon it felt like they were mere feet away. I looked around, seeing frantic faces illuminated by the flicker of lanterns. People tripped over cots, toppling them in desperate bids to flee. The old medic was trying to guide an injured man to a safer spot, but the surge of frightened survivors separated them. Meanwhile, I caught sight of James leading a small group toward a side corridor. He beckoned me over and I forced my shaking legs to move, clutching my backpack tight. Halfway there, I felt the gym doors behind me shudder with impact. Something had slammed into them, hard enough to bend the metal frames. The doors screeched in protest, hinges straining. Sarah appeared at my side, her face pale. "We have to find a secure room," she said, voice trembling. "We can't stay in the open." Nodding, I followed her. Around us, family wept, uncertain where to go. One volunteer urged them to the locker rooms, but that area felt compromised after Drew's group left. Another volunteer was banging on a locked staff office, pleading for them to open up. Confusion swelled and no single plan held. In the chaos, I stuck to Sarah and James. We managed to guide a small cluster of terrified survivors, maybe 7 or 8 people, toward a short corridor at the rear of the gym. It led to a narrow staircase, which in turn led up to the second floor. We thought if we got higher, we could barricade a smaller area and buy ourselves time. Lightning flashed through a high window, illuminating the corridor. Torn posters and scattered papers littered the ground. The walls were scuffed, some bearing cryptic markings we hadn't noticed before. We pressed on, hearts thundering. A blood-chilling crash came from behind, the gym doors finally gave way. The resulting chorus of screams twisted my insides. We heard a frenzied clamor of footsteps on the gym floor. Our flashlight beams wavered across the corridor walls as we picked up our pace. Rounding a corner, we discovered an office with a heavy wooden door. The sign read, "Coach's Office." We hurried inside. James and 2 others helped push a cabinet against the door. The rest of us stood panting in the cramped space, hearts pounding in our ears. The coach's office smelled musty, like an old locker full of unworn sneakers. A single window high on the wall gave us a skewed view of the night sky. Rain had finally started to fall, tapping lightly on the glass, yet even that gentle sound was overshadowed by the continued uproar from the gym. We used our flashlights sparingly, aware that we might need to conserve batteries for an unknown length of time. Huddling in the office, we tried to calm each other. One person, a teenage girl, was sobbing softly, her shoulders shaking. Another, an older man, crouched in the corner, face drawn in a grimace. Sarah pulled out a small candle from her bag, one of those emergency candles meant for power outages. She lit it and its warm glow became a tiny beacon against the encroaching darkness. It was a pitiful comfort, but in that moment, it felt precious. We listened, breathless. The sounds from the gym ebbed and flowed, thumps, shouts, the occasional crash of furniture. After a while, we couldn't tell if we still heard movement or if our fearful imaginations were amplifying every slight creak in the building. My phone vibrated one last time, a feeble attempt at an alert. I checked the screen, the battery icon blinked near 0. The message was a repeat of the earlier one, advising no safe zones were available. Then, as if exhausted itself, the phone died. Exhaustion weighed on my eyelids, but adrenaline kept me wide awake. The candle burned low, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Occasionally, a thunderclap made us jump. A few in our group dozed fitfully, leaning against the cabinets or lying on the floor. Then, in the pre-dawn hours, the chaos that had filled the gym seemed to subside. The distinct clamoring of banging doors and toppling chairs faded. We sat in silence, straining our ears for any hint of movement. Sarah tried to peer under the gap in the office door, but only darkness greeted her. Finally, James motioned for quiet and pressed his ear against the door. The building felt eerily calm, as if whatever had forced its way inside had moved on or was simply waiting. He shook his head, uncertain. We whispered among ourselves, some thought we should stay put until daylight, hoping that the morning sun would provide a safer time to explore. Others argued that we needed to move now, while whatever was in the gym might have dispersed. No one wanted to step out of our makeshift haven, we couldn't shake the sense that danger lurked just beyond the door. A faint glow in the window told us dawn was near. Pale light revealed dust motes floating in the stagnant air. The candle had burned down to a small nub, flickering on the edge of extinction. My mind raced, if a rescue hadn't arrived yet, it might never come. Lincoln High School, once a stable fortress, now lay in tatters. The fence was presumably breached, the gym doors broken. We had no idea how many survivors, if any, remained in the building. The older man in the corner quietly muttered, "We can't stay here forever, we'll run out of water." Sarah stared at the door, fist clenched. James gripped a makeshift metal rod he'd found in a utility closet days before. A hush fell over us as we weighed the reality of our situation. The sun would soon rise, we had to decide whether to search the building for any remaining supplies or attempt to escape. Was the outside even a better option now? If the perimeter was overrun, stepping outside could be a straight path into danger, yet staying put felt like waiting to be discovered by something we dreaded. I opened my backpack, sifting through its contents for the 10th time that night, a half-pack of crackers, a small water bottle, a flashlight with dimming batteries and a notebook I'd used to jot down my observations. I contemplated writing one last entry, but my hand shook too badly. Sarah drew in a sharp breath. "If we go, we must stick together," she whispered, as if more for her own reassurance than ours. No one disagreed, and so here we are, cramped inside this dim office, minutes away from sunrise. The last of the candlelight dances across our fearful faces. Outside that door, a corridor leads back to the gym, now silent but laden with uncertainty. Beyond the gym's shattered walls, a world transformed by an unimaginable threat awaits. We've reached the edge of our refuge and must decide how to proceed. Every instinct warns that danger lurks in every hallway, every street, yet we can't hide forever. The question remains, do we wait for a miracle or do we forge our own path into the unknown? I'm scribbling these final lines in the back of my notebook, the flashlight's beam flickering. My mind races with thoughts of what might happen once we set foot outside this office. Perhaps we'll find a safe route out of the city, or maybe we'll discover that any path we choose leads to the same looming terror. All I know for certain is that we've come to a point of no return. The last phone alert said that immediate shelter was no longer an option, and I believe it. The fence, the gym, the entire school, these walls can't protect us anymore. If we choose to remain, we might avoid the outside world's horrors for a few more hours or days, but at what cost? There's a low thud somewhere beyond the door. Sarah and James both look at me with wide eyes, the group stirs, hearts pounding. It could be a random noise or the sign that our hiding place is about to be discovered. In the silence, we exchange determined glances. Someone gently blows out the candle, plunging the office into near darkness. We brace ourselves for whatever comes next. Outside, the first rays of sunlight creep in through the high window, illuminating dust motes in a hazy glow. We stand, gripping our scant supplies, hardly breathing. The future is unwritten and it terrifies us, yet we have no choice but to face it. It's time. Thank you for listening. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion and sometimes a curse.